let me just start off with some context-wise, right? In terms of, certainly I'll be talking about testing, but not just from a company perspective, but as Secretary Yao just mentioned, it's much more than just about reopening travel-wise. So how do we reopen life and actually create a new normalcy? And this is key, right? Because I think for the 2020-wise, at least for myself, I haven't traveled anywhere. I think a lot of people have not been able to get to see their family, tourists-wise, right? And for business as well. So I think where the role of testing is really, really important in terms of how can I actually create a new normalcy with rapid, accurate testing. And just to give everyone some context, so certainly I think for us at Prenetics, we actually started doing our COVID-19 testing back in April here in Hong Kong. So we launched the at-home COVID-19 test. In the UK, we also launched COVID-19 testing. And certainly I actually have a few slides in terms of showing what our response to COVID-19 testing has been. So let's go to the slide deck. So I'm sure everyone always loves to see numbers and data-wise, right? So certainly since April, we've actually have performed over 300,000 PCR tests. With 300,000 PCR tests, we've identified almost close to 300 individuals which were positive. At an average turnaround of 12 hours, we visited over 24,000 restaurants, markets, et cetera, wise, right? And so certainly we've been fortunate to work with the Hong Kong government. In the UK, we brought back Premier League to resume their training as well as their season. Of course, Liverpool won. And English Cricket Board, we're working a lot of different private organizations, et cetera. We introduced the first digital passport to go back into the stadiums, right? In terms of that individuals can show a negative result. But certainly, through all this testing, I always felt that, it was just not efficient. Even though we know PCR, we own and operate our own laboratory, but we wanted to find a way to disrupt ourselves because it was vastly inefficient, even though we actually operate our own laboratory. I was like, as an entrepreneur-wise, I was like, this does not make sense. Yeah, in many aspects, we became a logistics company rather than a testing laboratory company. Because the challenge of PCR testing is it takes very long time, right? The minimum laboratory time takes around 4 to 6 hours to get results. And in many cases, you get results in 24 hours, or in the US or in Europe, you get results in 3 days. So basically, if someone's infected, you get your results in 2-3 days. That test basically is not worth anything, right? And then so we started looking into rapid testing because we felt that there has to be a better way. And so certainly that's why early on, back in April, we started looking at this. And so certainly the reason why we looked at this, again, the current method is not so efficient. Let me get to the next slide. Can I get to the next slide? And then so what we wanted to find is basically, again, a rapid test. And because the rapid test is so critical to the resumption of travel and the overall economy. And there's three things, key things, as Secretary Yao mentioned, must be accurate, fast, and low cost, right? So certainly everyone knows the RT-PCR is the gold standard. That will always be the gold standard. But certainly there's also another technology which is called RT-LAMP. And a lot of people around the world now are accepting RT-LAMP as a new standard for population screening and airport screening. And the reason why is because it does not take 4 to 6 hours to get results. You can do it on the spot of testing. You get results within the reaction times within 30 minutes, but certainly the whole process can be within 1 hour to get results, right? And so certainly a lot of countries are accepting LAMP as a method, as a COVID-19 test requirement to get through. So certainly we've also been very fortunate. About 2 weeks ago, we actually launched a LAMP test in Heathrow. For pre-departures, individuals can actually go to Heathrow 1 hour before and basically get a test and then get results within 60 minutes and then fly into Hong Kong. Previously, they actually had to do 72 hours, get a PCR test somewhere else in the city. And in the UK, it's actually very difficult to get a test, right? And the challenge also is the reason why they did the 72 hours because there was no better alternative. Because if you think about it, I can do a test today, and then 2 days later, I can travel. But the problem with that is tomorrow, you don't know where I'm going. Or I could be going to Lang Wei Fong or somewhere, right? And get infected. But then, because it's not immediate. And then so the reality is that the test has to be rapid to enable fast testing on the spot. Wise, right? And certainly for universities, schools, elderly care homes, etc. wise, it's highly important. Next slide, please. And so, as mentioned, Secretary Yeung mentioned, IATA, this is basically last month, right? They call for systematic COVID-19 testing before departure. And because if you're able to do pre-departure testing and on-arrival testing, then it's a really safe measure, wise, right? And so certainly I think that's why Singapore and Hong Kong wise, if you have dual tests in both locations, from a simulation modeling, the actual risk of missing one infected passenger is 1 in 2 million, right? Because again, certainly, of course, Singapore and Hong Kong, we've been able to contain COVID very well, but the risk is so minimum with basically pre-departure and on-arrival testing. And right now, we are speaking to a lot of governments around the world as well as airports. So I think almost pretty much every government or airport is thinking or in the process of facilitating rapid testing in the airport, which certainly will be the new norm, right? And so this brings to this slide. And certainly, a few months ago we've actually had the fortunate aspect to actually collaborate with University of Oxford, so in which basically they developed this rapid test. This rapid test basically, again, it's depending on your use case, it can be very scalable and you could use it anywhere. If let's say you want to test at an event, you can actually test all the individuals at an event before they go into a certain section. You have your opera, your music, your sports, but certainly if you want to do a high throughput testing at the airport, you can actually set it up fully automated, watch, right? And the reaction time is very rapid, 15, 30 minutes. Certainly in terms of sensitivity, and this is where everyone always asks me about this question, right? Sensitivity, how does it compare to the gold standard of PCR? So if gold standard of PCR is 100%, what we have found through multiple clinical trials is that the sensitivity of LAMP is 96% at a certain CT. So CT level is basically the amount of virus you have within your body, right? So we've actually gotten into 100% below CT33, right? And the overall wide, 96%. I think the challenge right now we have a lot of governments is that we know that PCR is the gold standard. But then the challenge is a lot of government, they want to input PCR in the airport. But the challenge, it defeats the actual travel bubble if you actually have PCR, because the reason why is that people are not going to travel if you have to wait 4 to 6 hours at a minimum to go to a destination. So there's that. So I always say, you can't fit. Everyone knows that the PCR is a gold standard, but you can't fit a 747 in a Hong Kong apartment, right? There's just no way, correct? So what's the best alternative? We know right now the best alternative from what even the FDA says is actually still defined as a nucleic acid test, which is a LAMP test, RT-LAMP. So FDA defines only 2 types of technologies, which are nucleic acid tests, PCR, and LAMP. And a lot of people talk about antigen tests, correct? Especially within the last 6 to 8 weeks, antigen tests. And antigen test is a great test, right? For diagnostic reasons, for individuals with symptoms, right? But when you're traveling or population screening, most likely you're not going to travel if you have symptoms. So that's where antigen does not work. It does not able to detect individuals which are asymptomatic. And the reason that is because with nucleic acid test, it's still a diagnostic test, which is 100x more sensitive than antigen testing. And WHO has actually said do not use antigen testing in basically airport screening or population screening, right? So certainly at the same time, low cost, very easy to set up. This is actually, if we can point the camera here, I mean, Secretary Yeung, you had this last time. Mm-hmm. So this is actually a laboratory right here. So this is a simple heat block, and there's nothing special about this heat block. It's $400 USD, right? I can bring this anywhere. So as you can see, this is a heat block, and this is very simple, $400 USD. And then basically all I need is a reaction kit, and basically I can do testing anywhere. All right, so I can go to individuals' home. If there's an outbreak, we can drive a mobile van there and then test individuals. And the speed is critical to actually prevent outbreaks, because even if you wait 24 hours, that individual may infect their family or friends, or go back into the community. But if you're able to detect it frequently, that's critical. And just about 2 weeks ago, there was a major study in Harvard, right? They actually said frequency of testing and speed of testing is much more important than sensitivity. If you're able to do frequent testing on a weekly basis, you could reduce infectiousness by 65%, even though you lose 3%. All right, so that was quite critical. So certainly, I mean, Michelle's in the room here, and then even Michelle, he's thinking about doing an event, which is United Hong Kong for later this month, and he wants to test all the individuals before the event to make people feel safe. All right, because now I think people will be scared to go to an event with 50 people, 100 people, 200 people. How do you ensure going back to normalcy, right? Next. And so certainly, I mean, this is just basic aspect in terms of we've already gotten the MHRA approval, which is basically the FDA equivalent in the UK as well as the CE mark for the EU. So the product is actually already ready, and so that's why we've been able to make it work in Heathrow. And so certainly very exciting here in Hong Kong International Airport. We've been actually trialing this for the past 1 week with another for first week. We started last Wednesday. It'll go on until next Wednesday for a period of 2 weeks. Next. And then so this is a quick comparison in terms of the different types of testing. You have, again, this is still a nucleic acid test, which is quite critical to understand and identify. And so certainly this was a reporter that actually called this a game-changing test when he was actually the first reporter to do the test in Heathrow. Right? So the Secretary Yao, he visited our rapid testing facility last week. So interestingly, this laboratory in Hong Kong International Airport used to be a smoking lounge. Right? And the smoking lounge was actually the perfect location for it because it's a negative pressure room. So we actually set up a fully automated laboratory capable of testing 12,000 passengers in only 2,000 square feet within 20 hours on a daily basis. So that's the throughput with LAMP. And so this is actually what we set up in the Hong Kong International Airport, enabled by Prenetics and Oxford University, fully automated. Again, if you need to do a community testing, you just bring the heat block. But for airport scenarios, then we automate everything, because certainly speed is critical. And even just yesterday, we actually did a pilot with 200 passengers in Hong Kong International Airport, and individuals were able to do the sample collection, get the results within 60 minutes, and the idea that enables a travel bubble, because when you're waiting for your luggage, it doesn't feel that long, right? So 60 minutes and afterwards you go on to your journey. And so certainly we feel this is a definitely game changer and be able to resume normalcy. And so certainly, as you can see, this is a digital passport, right? So certainly this is also going to be very common in the future. When you go to events, even universities, travel, definitely, that individuals will then have to show a QR code, and that changes color. Watch, right? If you're green, you're able to pass through. If you're, let's say, red, gray, etc., right, it's pending or positive. So certainly this is the new normalcy, how I see, and I think it is certainly enabled by rapid testing. And so again, this is how we see rapid testing. I believe it's going to be one of the most important interventions in Hong Kong and for the world to prevent outbreaks and to avoid social distancing measures, which will be detrimental to the economy, right? So I think this is going to be key, and then we're already seeing this move very rapidly on a global basis. So again, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and hopefully the globe can have RT LAMP to enable a little bit of normalcy in our lives.
And today we're talking about testing, but at some point in time there will be a vaccines, and we'll need to reflect on when authentication of vaccination will need to make it to those passes we are discussing today. But today is about testing, and I think that's very true that in the world of the fourth industrial revolution, there are solutions today that do allow for authentication of lab results and certification of compliance with host destinations. Those solutions need to be leveraged, and in a way the governance protocols need to evolve, including at the level of member states, at the level of WHO, but also to some extent we are in full support of the recommendation from the International Civil Aviation Organization when it comes to implementing the type of protocols that we've seen emerging in Hong Kong and as promoted by Cathay Pacific and Prenetics. So thank you very much for having me today. The quarantine elimination is obviously a big incentive for travelers to resume their journeys, and in turn this will result into huge economic benefits for the travel and tourism industry. But we need to do that with caution, and I would like to reflect on the type of tests being used and the certification that the tests are the right ones. Obviously, as Danny discussed before, qPCR is today's gold standard. LAMP is a very, very promising alternative because you can do that in airport, and we would obviously support any solution that reduces the time between the moment the test is being performed and the moment the travelers take the plane. So that's where the solutions of Prenetics is quite interesting. I think we will find that the gold standard will be about testing in airports and testing, as that was discussed before, testing upon departure and possibly even testing on arrival. We think that qPCR has limitations because testing 2 or 3 days before you take a plane creates a residual risk. And it may well comply with country regulations, but we think it's possibly insufficiently secure and deserves a debate. So we think the gold standard will be about testing in airports, and obviously when it comes to qPCR, we will need to see emerge networks of accredited labs so that you know precisely that the organization that's performing the test is fully reliable. So that's a point number one I would like to make. Now we need to make sure that the type of testing we are promoting is not going to create a feeling of false security with travelers. And in the current period, we would need to make sure that it's not going to become an encouragement for travelers to circulate between low vaccine circulation areas to high circulation areas. And we see what's happening in Europe and we see what's happening in the US. I think it's a very, very careful decision to be made as we encourage travelers to resume their journeys. And finally, I would like to mention the fact that there is certainly a huge opportunity for harmonizations of regulations. If you look into what's happening in Europe at this point in time, the protocols are still at this point in time, as discussed with the European Commission, to let member states implement their own regulations. And we see that a number of those countries are still promoting quarantines as the gold standard. I think that this deserves a governmental discussion across member states. And there is a huge opportunity for WHO and ICAO to actually promote new standards that would be enforced in a consistent manner between the member states. So my words today are full support to the type of blockchain validated solution and authentication of test results, providing certification of compliance with host countries' regulations, but doing that with a word of caution when it comes to traveling between low circulation zones to high circulation zones. Thank you very much.